everybody. Welcome to the Minimalist Podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. My name is Joshua Fields Milburn. Ryan Nicodemus is on vacation this week, but don't worry, he'll be back next week. In the meantime, we've got Malabama here.
Hi, everybody.
TK Coleman.
What it is.
Oh, we got the rest of our team here in the studio as well. And coming up today on this free public minimal episode, we're talking to a couple listeners about topics that seemingly have nothing to do with minimalism. We're calling this one Not Minimalism, although you might find that they have a lot to do with minimalism. We also have an outstanding lightning round segment, a live stream question, and a listener tip for you. You can check out the full 2.5-hour maximal edition of episode 386, where we answer 4 times the questions and we dive deep into several simple living segments. That private podcast episode is out right now at patreon.com/theminimalists. Your support keeps our podcast and both of our YouTube channels 100% advertisement free, because advertisements suck. We'll get to our callers in a moment, so if you have a question or comment for our show, give us a call, 406-219-7839, or email a voice memo to podcast@theminimalists.com. But first, we have a question from Erica on Patreon.
What does minimalism have to do with normal, everyday subjects like friendships, having pets, and enjoying entertainment?
So, TK, we both know that focusing on less creates room for more. And Erica brings up friendships. I was a friendship hoarder at one part in time. One time in my life, I was a friendship hoarder. I wanted more friends. More is better. And I think that is sort of the disease of more. More stuff must be better. More square footage of my home must be better. More friends must be better. More money must be better. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But when we're just pursuing more for the sake of more, it tends to become clutter over time. And so she mentioned a few things here. Friendships, for some people, like Ryan, who's not here today, but he is an extrovert, an extreme extrovert. And so he makes do with more friendships than me. But even then, having the appropriate amount of intentional relationships is thriving for him. With me, it's having far fewer friendships, but having friendships that are really meaningful for me, but also redefining what friendship looks like. But then there are these other areas as well, having pets. We did an entire pet episode before TK came on board. We brought some experts in here and we talked about minimalist pets. We'll put a link to that episode in the show notes, because the truth is that you could hoard pets. In fact, we see it on the TV show Hoarders, right? What happens is there are dead pets they hold on to. There's excrement all over the house, because when we just want more, the things begin to get in the way, including our pets and pet waste. And then she also mentioned enjoying entertainment. Now, we have this entertainment machine in our pockets now that follows us around everywhere. And it's easy to be pacified, to be entertained 24/7. When I'm constantly looking for more dopamine through my entertainment, I'm not being intentional. And after a while, if I binge watch something for 4, 5, 10 episodes, I start to feel miserable in a way.
Yeah.
And so I've been thinking about this episode. I wanted to call it Not Minimalism, because we put a call out to our Patreon supporters and also a call out on social media and said, hey, we have a challenge for you. Because last week we did a whole episode about monogamy and non-monogamy.
Right.
And I'm going to talk to you on the private podcast about how that completely changed my mind about some things. But I also thought that minimalism definitely has something to do with relationships. However, there are some things that probably have nothing to do with minimalism. And so we put a call out to our patrons and said, hey, let us know if you can think of something that has absolutely nothing to do with minimalism. We're going to talk about some of those things today. I wanted to throw a few out to you, though, TK. Yeah. And you tell me, does minimalism have anything to do with this?
I'm going to say yes already before hearing the things, because my understanding of minimalism is such that it has something to bring to every discussion, regardless of what it is.
Okay. So tell me about this. I've gone down this rabbit hole recently of the Egyptian pyramids, and it seems that the Egyptians didn't actually build these pyramids 4,500 years ago. At least there's a lot of evidence to the contrary there. And I looked at that and I said, well, what the hell does minimalism have to do with that, TK?
So let's back up a little bit, because I believe you gave earlier the defining question of minimalism, which is, how might my life be better with less? Now, what's interesting is whenever we say that, the most common question we get in response to it is, well, what about people who don't have enough as it is? And I think that question comes because there's a silent phrase that gets attached to the end of your question. And that phrase is physical goods. So when people hear, how might my life be better with less? What they hear is, how might my life be better with less physical goods? And I just like the question as it is with less, because that leaves room for other kinds of baggage. There's physical clutter, but we also carry philosophical baggage, and we also carry psychological baggage, which we bring to bear on all of our experiences, right? So I would define philosophical baggage as any self-defeating belief or any element of incongruence in your worldview. And psychological baggage, I would define that as maybe an ineffective or harmful way of processing your emotions, or a self-defeating pattern of behavior. Now, consider any issue in your life. Ask yourself, if that issue is less than perfect in your life, is there an opportunity for improvement by taking a look at the philosophical assumptions you're making, taking a look at the patterns of behavior you have around it, taking a look at the way you're processing your feelings in relation to that issue, and doing some unpacking, doing some simplifying? Usually every approach to problem solving involves some element of that. And so minimalism may not be, let's say, a political philosophy or a sociological theory. It may not be a comprehensive theory of pets, right? Or it may not be a philosophy of money or race, but there are mental models and strategies that are employed in the minimalistic worldview that can be applied to anything, because it's impossible to experience a clutter problem without experiencing some kind of philosophical or psychological issue in relation to the things that we call clutter. So that's kind of like the groundwork. Now, what's the particular thing you want me to apply that to?
Well, I'm thinking about a few things here. And so there are a few things I want to talk about throughout the episode. So we have a question about anti-racism that we're going to talk about on the private podcast. I'm going to take the anti-stance. You'll take the pro-racism stance, and we'll figure it out together.
The pyramids. That's what
we're going to get there, but becoming an organ donor as well. We have a question about that. And I can certainly see how minimalism applies to that. The anti-racism thing, I'm not really sure. And so we'll have a conversation about that. Yeah. But something like the pyramids, which for me is a bit of entertainment, I'm fascinated by it, right? I'm fascinated by, okay, what were the pyramids actually used for? And how could they have possibly built those? But I don't know how to see that even through a minimalist lens. I never even thought about it that way.
Absolutely. So the kinds of questions you're asking about the pyramids belong to a field of philosophy known as epistemology. It's a much too fancy word for theory of knowledge. Episteme is a word that means to know. And your epistemology refers to the theory you have about what it means to know something, what kind of relationship must exist between our beliefs in order for those beliefs to be justified, what it means to be rational. So anytime we criticize someone and say, well, you're being irrational or you're not being reasonable, we're making epistemic presuppositions, right? We are revealing an epistemology that we have, a theory about what it means to know things. So when you're watching this documentary or you're reading this book on pyramids and you're contrasting it with things that you have been taught and you're starting to question those things, you're starting to do some epistemology. And what does that mean to do epistemology? What it means is that you're starting to unearth your assumptions, right? You're starting to unpack the beliefs that you've had about what makes a claim reliable, what constitutes an expert, when should we trust the experts and defer to them, and when should we challenge them and demand that they demonstrate what they know in an independently verifiable way. Also, what are the implications of my beliefs about pyramids? Does it even matter what I believe? Do we even need to know? Whenever we have philosophical discussions about anything important like history, religion, the pursuit of meaning, our place in the universe, all kinds of epistemological things come up, and they kind of get in the way of us being able to think critically about these things. So for instance, something that you'll often see whenever two people are discussing something that's complex is there's almost always an observer of the conversation who feels like if something were important or true, the answer would be obvious and easy to discover. And the very fact that we need to have these difficult discussions where we have to define our terms and engage in this complicated reasoning should be taken as evidence in and of itself that this is either unimportant or unknowable. But that's an epistemic assumption that's capable of being questioned. Maybe it's true, maybe it's false. So this is an example of how a minimalistic approach can even help you get underneath the hood of the presuppositions that you're bringing into a discussion about something like pyramids.
In our last Netflix film, which you were in, we talked about the definition of minimalism. And as this is our definition, someone else can call minimalism something else as well. But minimalism is the thing that helps us get past the things so we can make room for life's most important things. And so the key there is important things. And understanding, when you're talking about the epistemology here and you're applying it to pyramids, how are these important to me? And how would this discovery, how would knowing this be important to me? And it could very well be that it's not important at all, and then I can dismiss it, right? Yeah. But if it is important in some way, and it could be important just because it's entertaining, I'm fascinated by it, or I'm compelled by it for a short duration of time. And that's okay as well. But it's important only if it's compelling to me. Now, if I go to you and say, TK, I need you have to read this book about the pyramids, right? You must watch this video. Now I'm prescribing something that may not be important to you at all. Speaking of prescriptions, I think there's one other area that often is confusing for folks. When people talk about how might your life be better with less, they append it with physical goods, material possessions, right? As you said. And so then, therefore, we conflate minimalism with organizing or Marie Kondo's tidying up. But I would say that tidying up, I'm not going to say it has nothing to do with minimalism, but it has way less to do with minimalism than how we think. Because when we're thinking about all of these other types of clutter. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. It's, yes, there is philosophical or mental clutter, emotional clutter, spiritual clutter, calendar clutter. We just did an episode about food clutter. And it has nothing to do with the material possessions. We can start with the things, but quite often the problem is organizing or tidying up. We did a whole thing with Marie Kondo recently. You know, she admitted that, like, now that I have 3 kids, the tidying up thing doesn't really work that well for me. And what I realized when I first stumbled into minimalism, it worked for people who are young, single people traveling the world, but it also worked for people like Leo Babauta and his wife who have 6 kids together in a blended family, and they are a minimalist family. And I realized, you're setting up some boundaries in your life, and those boundaries are much more adjustable than just the prescriptions, the rules of tidying up. Erica, I'd love to send you a copy of actually it's free. You can download it for free. It's the Minimalist Rule Book. 16 rules for living with less, but we tricked you. There are no rules there. They're just boundaries, and they're adjustable boundaries for simplifying your life and living more intentionally. 16 different ways to live more intentionally. You can download it for free over at theminimalists.com/rulebook, or you can find it on our resources page over at theminimalists.com. And what else? Let us know in the comments. Is there anything that you think has nothing to do with minimalism? Let's start a discussion there in the comments.
Sorry. I want to make one quick little case without getting in the weeds, why it could be deemed as important to wrestle with issues like who created the pyramids or other seemingly unanswerable questions like what is the nature of time? Do aliens exist? And things of that sort. If we spend all of our time only focusing on day-to-day issues that pertain to our survival, we limit the capacity for our imagination, and we limit the development of our critical thinking skills. It's only when we exercise our minds by wrestling with things for which there are no easy answers that we develop our full potential. So think about it in terms of sports. Like, how do you practice in sports? What's the definition of practice? Well, you subject yourself to constraints and challenges that are more difficult than what's required required of you in the performance, so that when you go back to the performance, it's actually easier, right? So you are practicing well when what you're doing at practice is harder than what you actually do in the fight, in the race, in the swimming contest, in the tennis match, or what have you. Well, there's the philosophical version of that as well. When you wrestle with these really deep, complex issues for which there are no easy answers, think about what that does to your thinking, to your problem-solving skills when you come back to the everyday stuff of just getting through a day, making decisions about work, making decisions about family. Questions about who built the pyramids are so much more elusive, but it expands your mind in a way that yields benefits with a lot of the practical stuff that we can't ignore.
And expand your mind because there may not be an answer. And also forming a détente with the fact that you're not going to have an answer for everything is one of the ways that we get comfortable in our discomfort. Because I'm a problem solver and I want the answer. I want it right there in front of me. But sometimes there just isn't an answer. Or if there is an answer, it's an unknowable answer. Our friend Sam Harris talks about this. Right now, there is a specific integer of the number of birds that are flying above the surface of the earth. But that is completely unknowable by us. And that number changes every millisecond, probably, right? But it is an actual number that could theoretically be tracked, but we will never know that. And you could drive yourself crazy needing to know that. But part of knowing is also understanding that you're not going to know everything. Let's dive into a question here from Alex.
This is Alex B. from Mount Pleasant, North Carolina, a fellow Patreon subscriber. I love my wife and our soon-to-be firstborn child due in March, but there is one problem. My wife works a job in education that clearly makes her dissatisfied due to systematic pressures, violence in the classroom, and a generally poor work environment, all while earning a below-average salary. We have spoken about how this job makes her feel physically and emotionally multiple times. She acknowledges that she is open and willing to find a new job, but every time that I offer my help, she reverts back to not wanting to leave her current position. The only thing she will communicate is that she wants to stay at her current job because she knows what to expect, even though it isn't what she wants. She then proceeds to quietly shut down and remove herself from the conversation. I have and will continue to be available when it comes to searching for jobs, applying for positions for her, writing her cover letter, and creating her resume. I am willing to help support her in whatever way I can so she can find joy and passion in whatever she chooses next. I have a universal problem. I brought the horse to water, but it won't drink. I know we can't change the people around us, so is it time for me to step back and be on standby for the day that my wife potentially changes her mind?
So the line that Alex is talking about here is you can't change the people around you, but you can change the people around you. And when I talk about that, what I'm not advocating, Alex, is, well, yeah, it sounds like you just need to leave your wife in the dust and surround yourself with some people who might be more like-minded. Obviously, we're in a different predicament here. TK, I'm really interested in your thoughts, and then I'll get back to what I would say to him. But what do you have to say to Alex?
Yeah, I would say your wife doesn't suffer from an information problem. It's a feasibility problem. Is that a word, Professor? Feasibility?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because the other day I added ility to something and he was like, that's a needless variant. My confidence has been shaken ever since. Every time I talk, I'm like, am I just full of needless variants? Is my whole life a needless variant?
Hey,
okay.
Sean, thanks for this tangent.
Sorry.
My bad.
All right. Your wife doesn't suffer from an information problem, but rather it's a feasibility issue, meaning that she doesn't need any more conversation about what she would be happier doing. She doesn't need any more conversation about why she doesn't like her current job. That's not the hard part, and it never is. When you think about the changes that we try to make in our lives, you can ask almost anyone and they'll tell you there's something that they would like to be doing a little bit better. I like to exercise more. I like to eat healthier. I like to spend more time with my family. But the hard question is always, how do I integrate the knowledge of what I think I should do or the knowledge of what I want to do into the particular life that is mine, with all of the unique challenges and the way those conditions come together to define my life. That's incredibly difficult. And you can't help a person with that by giving them the pros and cons or giving them the arguments for why they just ought to change, or by accurately predicting how unhappy they're going to be in the future if they stay on the same path. You have to find a way to help them see a different way forward that looks feasible for them, given the unique context that is their life and the challenges that come along with it. So if she's telling you, I want something different, I don't like where I am, but then every time you say, all right, let's make it happen, she gets intimidated and shuts down, then that means she's open to the possibility you're presenting to her, but there's something about the way you're approaching the conversation around a game plan or the strategization itself that just feels overwhelming. And so I would put my attention there and say, how can I break down this process in a way that allows her to take forward progress without feeling like it's work, without feeling like it's something that she can get wrong? So here's an example of something that my wife and I are doing. She's got this box of stuff. And the other night, she's like, I need help with this stuff. And so we sit down and she pulls out all these things. And she's like, now I got this. And she gives an argument for each thing, why she must keep it in the box. And it's like 20 different things. And all of these arguments are pretty difficult to get around. And I say, you know what? Let's do this. Let's put everything back in the box and let's come back to this tomorrow. And we're going to do this every night this week. We're going to spend no more than 15 minutes considering one thing in the box. You're going to pull one thing out of the box, and each night we're going to look at that and we're going to talk about it for 15 minutes, and then we're going to make some kind of decision. And we had our first night last night. We pulled one thing out of the box and we got rid of most of the stuff, like 75% of the elements involved with that one thing. We were able to get rid of it. She felt so much better. And I says, we're stopping right there. We're ending on a good note. We're coming back tomorrow with the second thing. And that's something that feels less overwhelming for her. So is it possible to say something like, hey, look, we're not going to create a game plan. We know where you want to end up. Who knows how long it will take? What if we just said one night a week, we're going to sit down for 15 minutes and we're just going to talk about what an alternative might look like. And we don't have to make any commitments or any decisions. And that can get her to commit to the process of coming back to this every day or every week until some progress is made. And whether it's that I suggested or something else, at the end of the day, it's about figuring out a way to make it feasible.
What you're talking about to me, and I like to make this distinction between help and support. And you can try to drag her in the direction in which you think she wants to move, right? Mm-hmm. And she may even intellectually want to end up over there. But how good is she going to feel if you have to drag her all the way over there? Right. And if that happened literally, she's going to be bruised up and scarred, and you're going to be in divorce court really soon. Yeah. In fact, Alex, if your wife came to me, right, or she called into the show and she was like, hey, here's what I'm looking to do, I would tell her, you need to leave where you are as close to immediately as possible, as soon as possible, so that it's not a detriment to your existing life, but it is a detriment right now. Staying where you are, there's a lot of discontent, a lot of stress. You're underpaid. You're probably underappreciated as well. And you can show her those things, but forcing her in a particular direction is not helpful at all.
That's right.
The least helpful person I know is the helpful man who tries to help everyone. I'm dragging you wherever I need you to go. However, what TK's talking about, it feels helpful, but what he's talking about is support. Hey, I'm here with an additional perspective. I'm here to have a shoulder to cry on, an ear to listen. I'm here if you need me. And even if it's just 15 minutes once a week, let's start there. We're going to start somewhere. I'm going to meet you where you are as opposed to dragging you where I think you should be immediately. Because let's face it, Alex, it might have taken you a long time to figure out this whole simplifying thing, this minimalism thing. And I could see how someone would say, what the heck does this question have to do with minimalism? But we're talking about career clutter here.
That's right.
That's where we spend most of our waking hours. And if you're not doing something that aligns with your passions, something that you're compelled by, something you're willing to devote yourself to, then most of your waking hours are going to be stressful. They're going to be filled with anxiety. Alex, I'd love to send you a copy of our first book. It's called Minimalism, Live a Meaningful Life. In that book, we talked about the 5 different areas of intentional living, and one of them has to do with cultivating your passion. I think that'll help you and specifically support your wife and what she's trying to do as well. TK, what time is it?
Oh man, it's time for the lightning round, where we answer your questions from TikTok.
Yes, indeed. You can follow The Minimalists on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at The Minimalists. Now, during the lightning round, we each have 60 seconds to answer your questions with a short, shareable, less than 140-character response. We put the text to these minimal maxims in the show notes over at theminimalists.com/podcast, so you can copy and share our pithy answers on social media if you'd like. Looks like we have a question here from Ask Your Mom.
Why do those of us who can afford expensive things very comfortably bother you so much?
TK, why do you hate rich people? Now, to be fair, this was a response to a TikTok video we put out there, and it was talking about how quite often the things that we thought we wanted will make us miserable, right? And we did this whole thing about car payments. Remember the car video we did? It was a really popular TikTok video, just hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views, but it triggered some people because they're saying, well, hey, wait a minute. Maybe I have a $1,500 car payment, or I have a $100,000 car. And TK, why don't you want me to be happy? And so let's get 60 seconds on the clock for TK. And what would your response be to Ask Your Mom?
Minimalism is a creative path for the bloated, not a consolation prize for the broke. If you are someone who is struggling to make ends meet, or you're suffering through a life in which you lack the economic resources necessary to survive and thrive, minimalism is not a message that's here to preach to you some unsympathetic idea that you ought to just put on a fake smile and ignore your legitimate needs and healthy desires. Nor is it a philosophy that says you ought to subjugate your life choices to someone else's arbitrary opinions about what you should possess or pursue. Minimalism is a way, not the way, for those who suffer from the self-diagnosed condition of consumeristic gluttony, those whose cabinets are full, but whose lives might be devoid of meaning, or those who pursue and possess material things in a way that compromises their relationship to the immaterial stuff that matters most to them. That's what minimalism is. It truly is that simple. It's not about being jealous, nor is it about condemning anyone. It's simply about helping people establish a relationship to stuff that helps them focus on the stuff that matters as they define it.
As they define it is the key. Oh.
Was I at... I thought I was at 60.
The ball was still in your hand when the buzzer hit. It's all good. We can't count that shot. It was great, but
we have to actually, in the name of integrity, delete that and not even release that to the public.
Not a chance, TK. I love your ramblings. Now, give me 60 seconds. I want to talk to Ask Your Mom. The cost of a thing extends well beyond the price tag. And so I don't care what you own. You can have a Prada bag, you can have Gucci shoes, you can have a Range Rover or a Rolls Royce or a Mercedes-Benz or a Lexus. You can have a Tag Heuer watch or a Rolex. You can have a really fancy suit from Brooks Brothers. You can have any of the accoutrements that make you look, quote unquote, successful, right? I don't care what you own. In fact, if the things that you own enhance your life, I don't want to deprive you of those things. The problem that I have with consumerism is the lie we've been told. If I buy more things, I will be complete. Your things will never complete you because you are already complete. You were born complete. You're complete now. In fact, the more things you get, they might actually incomplete you. Consumerism is a disease, and minimalism is the antidote.
Nice. How long was that, Professor?
It was exactly a minute.
Hey, you know what? Since this question came from Ask Your Mom, it just inspired me. I want a new personal segment called Ask Your Mama. And I want to put on, Martin Lawrence, the movie Big Mama, Big Mama's House?
Oh, yeah.
Put on the Big Mama House outfit and the wig, and people send me questions and they direct it to Ask Your Mama, and I answer it.
I'll tune into the private podcast for that. I'm sure that'll be a segment next week.
Private as in I'm doing this by myself without the cameras.
Stars.
We'll check in with the Patreon live stream here in a moment. But first, real quick for right here, right now, here's one thing that's going on in the life of the minimalist. Minimalists. So we've got this little side project. It's called minimalism.com. Minimalism Life is the name of the project. We partnered up with Carl over at Minimalissimo and Alberto at 5 Style, and then the Minimalists together. In this side project, we bring you the best of minimalist travel, well-being, and design over at minimalism.com. We just released our second book under this imprint. It's the second in, I think, 7 years at this point, and it is called Minimalism Life Volume 2. It's 50 essays about minimalism, about simple living, from a bunch of different writers from different backgrounds, including our good friend, Professor Sean. He has several essays in that collection. I wrote something for it as well. You can find it over at minimalism.com/book. We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. If you want to read more about intentional living, about simple living from a bunch of different perspectives that may not always agree with each other either, because there isn't one kind of minimalism. Here's the definition. Here's the template. No, it's different people learning how to live a meaningful life with less. Minimalism.com for the side project over there. Also, once a month with Minimalism Life, I do a little side podcast. They're like 3 or 4 minutes each. I read an essay. It's one of my favorite things that I do.
Yeah.
Very few people listen to it, but because I don't do much to promote it, but like I just read something and I'll talk about that essay that I wrote. And I experience great joy. And I listen to those podcast episodes. I go back and it's almost like I'm writing to myself in a way. And the podcast helps me more than it probably helps anyone else, or maybe it'll help you or support you as well. Minimalism.com. That's our little side project called Minimalism Life. Let's check in with the Patreon live stream, Alabama.
Sure thing. We have a lot of great stuff from the patrons today. Do we want to talk about direct questions or some ideas on how you connect this thing to not minimalism?
We'll get some deeper questions on the private podcast. Right now, let's do connecting a few smaller things.
Beautiful. Here's one from Georgia. Connect this. Tire rubber.
Wait, what does that even mean?
How do you connect that to minimalism?
What does tire rubber have to do with minimalism? I don't know. It's a dumb question. What's the next one?
Wait. No, let's just play with it. Like the rubber out of which tires are made?
Yeah, I don't know.
Sure.
So I'm not asking you to do the work for me and tell me what the connection is. I'm just asking, like, what are you referring to? Like, are you referring to like the tire on a car?
I guess. Sure. I don't know. What does tire rubber have to do with minimalism?
Yeah, I mean, the moment you bring in any physical possession, like that's the easiest possible thing that you could give us. Like this isn't hard at all. Like, do you ever need to have your tires changed?
Yes, right? I had to have mine rotated recently.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, whenever we're talking about the material possessions in our life, the question is, okay, here's one for you. I moved from Montana to California. In Montana, I had 2 sets of tires. You have to have snow tires when you live in Montana. Otherwise, you run into some problems when there's a lot of snow, right? And so I let go of a whole bunch of rubber. I sold them. And I was able to sell those snow tires to someone.
Yeah.
I got the money because why? Those things that were adding value to my life weren't adding value to my life at all anymore in California. I didn't need snow tires here. And so I was able to let them go, even though they served a purpose during a stage of my life, a chapter of my life. Let's do one more, Alabama, and then we'll save the rest for the private podcast.
Here's another one from Taylor. Brainstorming. What does that have to do with minimalism?
That's really good. So this is interesting. So I literally just taught a high school class yesterday. And we were doing a brainstorming session and everyone was scared. And after a couple of minutes, because I'm very comfortable with the silence, I don't feel the need to like coach them through it. We sat there for a couple of minutes. Then one person said something and they said it like a question, right? And they were like super scared. And I said, that's great. Like, let's work with that. And we put that idea down. And then everyone else started chiming in. And after we went through the brainstorming session, I began to talk with them about James Altucher's idea of exercising your idea muscle. And one of the things I said is, if you can learn to be comfortable with your bad ideas, comfortable with throwing them out there so that you can get critical feedback and collaboration from other people who will help you work on them, you will understand the secret to being able to generate solutions to any problem. But the difficulty with brainstorming is everybody's telling themselves a story that if I suggest an idea that doesn't work, I will be persecuted, I will be laughed at, I will never be taken seriously again. Brainstorming is one of the most difficult things for people to do of all ages. I've seen it in corporate training sessions. I've seen it in college classrooms and high school classrooms because people haven't learned to declutter the story they're telling themselves about how dangerous it is to ever put an idea out there that isn't perfect.
We'll check back in with the Patreon live stream here in a bit. But first, Malabama, what do you got for us?
Here's a minimalist insight from one of our listeners.
Hi, my name is Stephanie. I'm in Denver, Colorado. I was just calling as a person who has a creative hobby that accumulates a lot of stuff. I really love to crochet, so I have lots of yarn and felt and needles and all sorts of accoutrement, I think is the word you like, with that hobby. And I actually had turned it into a business on Etsy for about a year. And then I decided that wasn't a good choice for me. Well, now I have all of these items. I have a business size store of these items. And the way I decided to handle that was to liquidate my stock by creating donation items. I'm making little crochet photo props that I'm going to donate to my local hospital. And so it's become a project for me that will both help me minimize the stock that I have on hand, which are, yarn is something that's kind of hard to donate. But it's also given me a way to give back to my community in what I hope is a meaningful way for families that receive these little items that they can possibly, have photos taken of their children and then maybe donate themselves. So I just thought that was a way for artists to handle I have way too many supplies, because it really is a just in case item, not a just for when you're holding on to tons and tons and tons of craft supplies.
All right, y'all, that is our minimal episode for today. We'll see you on Patreon for the full 2.5-hour maximal edition of episode 386, which includes answers to a bunch more questions. Questions like, how do I let go of my people-pleasing tendencies? How does minimalism relate to and help highly sensitive people? Plus, we've got a million more questions for the minimalists. Also this week, we have a private minimalist home tour. You can step inside the pristine living room of one of our listeners. We've got a new Ads Suck segment for you, probably the most manipulative ad that I've ever seen. We have an outstanding added value segment, a very fun song that has nothing to do with minimalism, and much, much more of less. And if you want to hear all that, check out the Minimalist private podcast at patreon.com/theminimalist, or click the link in the description to subscribe and get your personal link so that our weekly maximal episodes play in your favorite podcast app. You'll also gain access to all of our podcast archives all the way back to episode 001. And if you're still on the fence, here's a testimonial from one of our lovely Patreon supporters. Ryan K. says, I have been subscribed to your podcast for quite some time. The public podcast, that is. And I didn't think it was possible for your content to get any better. But I was wrong. The private podcast is absolutely incredible. It's almost like an MTV Unplugged raw version of yourselves. TK shows up with his harmonica and his acoustic guitar every Tuesday here.
Just playing Christmas music.
Yes, indeed. This is the Minimalists Unplugged over at patreon.com/the Minimalist. If you leave here today with just one message, please let it be this: love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
Peace.
Every little thing you think that you need, every little thing you think that you need, every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it.